Did you have like a deer camp tradition?
It's funny you say that. We're right now, in fact, when we're done with this podcast, we're reviewing the next episode that'll roll out on one of our platforms. And it's me going back to northern Minnesota last November and making the circuit around all the old deer camps that my buddies had, which when I was growing up there, their dads and their grandfathers had those camps. And then it's been handed down generation to generation. So for me, it was a very rich flood of memories going back to all these old deer camps that my dad would take me to.
Yeah.
Hey, let's stop in at Ferguson's. Let's stop in out at Cody's. And so in the midday break, we'd stop in at all these old deer camps. And it was really cool. And it's a big part of that tradition back there.
Yeah. And it's, anyone that's listened to my podcast knows, but I have a thing where I'm trying to ingrain the deer camp tradition in the younger generations and trying to help that, because it was such a big part of my life and still is. Our deer camp, although it's in the same town that I live in, it's still a thing. You know, we go to our deer camp and people come from all the city areas and come to the middle of nowhere, as they call going to the mountains, they call it. Yeah. You know, that's just where I grew up. But the deer camp traditions of going to different people's camps, you might have, a steak dinner before the rifle season here, or you go out and have burgers over here and hanging out, and maybe a couple beers and standing around the meat pole and all of that. And I see that kind of dying a little bit as the generations kind of move on, and I want to continue that to happen because it's such a big part of my life.
Yeah, you saw me smiling when you brought that up. My wife not being from northern Minnesota, and she goes back and hears my friends talking about all these stories, and one day she asked me, she said, Dick's deer camp is only like 5 miles from his house. Why does he spend 2 weeks out there? I'm like, you got to be there to understand it, honey. But that traditional thing that you're talking about is, to me, is just, it's so formative of who I am and how I see the world today. And I hope the young hunters continue to have those kind of things from generation to generation, because there's not a part of my being as a hunter that isn't somehow wearing the fingerprints of those deer camps.
Yeah. And it's funny because now that I do, I guess, everything with East Meets West full time, I have the ability to go hunt more places and do this, but everyone always asks me, well, you're a big whitetail hunter. You don't go to Iowa or Kansas or some of these places very often to go hunt during November and beginning of December. And they're like, why? I'm like, I want to be at deer camp. I don't want to miss anyone in the family, bringing deer in and hanging out, and we'll go there and tell stories, after the hunts and kind of recap. And, maybe my uncle over here is having a bad run. He hasn't seen a deer in 3 days, and we talk through strategy and go through that. And I'm like, I love that more so than anything. And it's such a big part of my background. And that's cool. I did not know that background with you. So I'm excited to see, is that going to be on your YouTube channel that comes out? Yeah,
it'll be on our Fresh Tracks Plus platform. And then about, I think 6 months later, it'll be out on YouTube.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Nice.
It was a very memorable time to go back there. My brother still lives back there, so he and I got to spend 5 days hanging out, and then all my high school buddies and just cousins and second cousins. You know how it is when you get in those places. People who might live far, far away come home for deer season. And the one thing that my camera guy Jace was there. I went up and did a thing for the school and found out that they still close our little school the first Monday and Tuesday of deer season. I'm like, all right, everything is good in the world. We still close the school for the first 2 days. So, but that's just how it is up there. Hunting is the culture. It's the tradition. It defines a lot of relationships. It defines the people in a lot of ways. And so being there and trying to tell that story was important to me. Even though in 5 days of hunting, I only saw about 7 or 8 deer, and I did not see an antler.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.